Hey. Time for another out of this world story from our space. Sometimes we see the bomb coming. Sometimes you have to let a bomb go off to totally start over. But not before we get everything in order. Sometimes karma needs a hand. Today on our space, we learn the art of war. Got nuclear revenge against my girlfriend and my colleague. I apologize for any spelling or grammar mistakes. This is my first time posting. Backstory. My girlfriend Hannah and I grew up in a large town with a population of nearly 20,000 people. We went to the same high school, but had never met or talked to each other. We only began talking seriously a few years ago. After college, I was offered a job that required a lot of traveling around the state. I requested an office in my hometown's branch because I wanted to conduct business not only in the state, but also in my hometown. They also agreed because there was no business representatives present in my hometown. After a few months, I settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks at the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks traveling around the rest of the country. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown. I met Hannah at a party. It was a Friday. I had just returned from one of my trips and was checking in some paperwork at my office when Greg, managing director and colleague, walked in. Greg and I had grown up together. It was a tight-knit town, but we had attended different high schools. Since returning from college, though, we had formed a close friendship. He asked how things were, then I was asked if I wanted to come to a house party that he and a group of buddies were throwing that evening. It was a little bit short notice, but I said yes because I felt like a few drinks with friends would be beneficial. It was at the party that Craig introduced me to Hannah. She was a new hire at the branch where my hometown's office was located and was getting to know everyone. Having attended the same high school, we hit it off immediately. Everything had gone really well. Hannah and my parents got along, and Hannah's parents also proved and were happy that someone could make Hannah as happy as she was. She had relationship issues in the past and went through a lot of depression. I won't bore you with too many details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step, and she moved into my house in my hometown. Everything was going well for nearly a year, then things began to change. FaceTime sessions were cut short, or she was too busy to answer the phone. Suddenly, neighbors would tell me about how a car described to me like that of my friend Craig's, a black Chevy Camaro. It was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away. Some clothes that weren't mine were found in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she said that nothing was happening and I was overthinking things. She said Craig would come over occasionally to discuss business, etc., but never stayed the night. I brushed it aside. I took it as me being paranoid and carried on as if nothing was wrong, but there was always this nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. I discovered she had been lying to me nearly 6 months later. I had just completed a rather large contract with a new company, and negotiations had concluded earlier than I had anticipated. So, rather than staying for a few days, I decided to book an earlier flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours, and I drive into my hometown and down the alley behind my house so that I could get into the house without being seen and surprise Hannah. Some part of me was curious, however, as whether this mystery car was there. Sure enough, there was a car that was blocking the back entrance gate. I sat confused for a moment, wondering if it had just been the neglectful neighbor parking, only to realize that it was indeed Craig's car, a black Chevy Camaro. If it hadn't been for the high hedge, the line that I had put in a few years back for privacy, I might well have driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and thought it was strange that he was there so late as she claimed that he always had left by now. As I approached the back of the house, I saw something that made my heart drop into my stomach. There in the kitchen, Hannah and Craig were going at it, hard on. I froze, and time stopped. There was my closest friend having sex at my dining table with my girlfriend in my gosh darn house. I had no idea what to do. So many thoughts raced through my mind. Was I dreaming, or was this real? Why were they having sex in my house? Dejected, I turned and left without them noticing. I drove for what seemed like an eternity in my car. I was crying hard, but the sadness quickly turned to anger. I really wanted to hurt them bad. However, I was someone who did not believe in violence. It was then that I realized I was going to punish them both and destroy their lives. And what better time to begin than now? I drove back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Craig's car, and then walked back to the gate where I could see into the house and called for phone. When it rang, they both looked at the caller ID. A look of shock on their faces as my name came up, and I saw that she was contemplating answering it, and they allowed it to ring out for a few moments before they were back into it, and it dialed once again. This time she did pick up the phone as she was answering. I hung up and went back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back and asked why I was calling so late. I told her I was about 15 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her when I was coming in. She was obviously surprised and acted happy that I was coming. The call ended very quickly, after she said she was going to get up and get changed. I said bye and hung up a few moments later. Craig came flying to the gate, half naked, jumped into his car, and took off like a bat out of hell. I laughed a little, knowing the fear that they both would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Craig had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterward, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. I couldn't sleep. I needed to plan, and plan the revenge I did. My mother always taught me to be a pacifist, and always let universal karma take its course. But on this particular occasion, I decided that karma could use a hand. I decided to punish them both separately, but to destroy them both. I knew that Craig had a drug addiction, but nothing major. But he kept it very private. I only knew about it after I accidentally barged in on him in his office and saw some coke, but pretended I hadn't seen it when he had made his attempts to cover it up. I was doing him a pretty good solid because our office had a strict no substance abuse in the workplace policy. Some weeks later, I had friends over, including Craig, around for some drinks. For ensuring that Craig was sufficiently liquored up, I told her to stay the night and sleep it off till the wee hours of the morning. I took his keys to his office and drove down to our branch office. I went to work knowing he was drunk out of his mind and wouldn't be awake until the morning, and I searched his desk and drawers, particularly the drawer where I had caught him stashing his coke. I examined it further and discovered it had a false base. Lifting it up, I hit the jackpot. I thought he did regular drugs, coke and all that, but the stuff I saw on there was just downright awful. He had all types of stuff in there. I took photos and put everything back in place. Before leaving, I installed a small spy button camera I had gotten from Alabama for a really good price, right above the door. Everything was set, and the plan was slowly coming together. Craig had to be using drugs at least twice a day, judging by the drugs I saw in his drawer. I had once suggested to my girlfriend that we install CCTV cameras around the house for added security. Still, she was hesitant because she had heard stories about cameras being hacked by scammers and blah blah blah. Now that I think about it, I can see why she was bothered by it. So, before returning to the city for a flight, I staged a break-in by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open. I received several messages the moment I arrived. One from my clearly panicked mom, who was visiting and had found the back door smashed open and called the police. One from a very shaken-up Hannah, in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. All the way, I got Hannah to stay with my parents until after I got back and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system after getting the go-ahead from the police, so as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual, by God, I can't believe this has happened and why would anyone do this routine, after doing a thorough check of everything. I had the security company's representatives walk Hannah and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked. And then came the question I had been waiting for. What happens if we do some business and I don't want it recorded? When she asked this question, she pretended to be shy, but I knew exactly the reason she was asking. He assured us that this was a question he got asked a lot, and we were shown on the home computer if we wanted to be doing things without it being recorded, how to stop the recording for certain cameras, so that we could protect her modesty. As I was walking him out, I asked him if the cameras were turned off, could a notification be sent out just as a security precaution. He came back in and helped me through how to set up email notifications and left shortly after. In addition, after Hannah had gone grocery shopping, I installed the spy button cameras all over the house. It was fantastic. All I had to do was wait. At this point, I approached some legal advice groups on here for some help in relation to a couples law in my country. I needed to make sure that my upcoming plan could be legally carried out and that I would not be forced to pay out any money or equity to Hannah, as I didn't know who were classified as a de facto couple or not. I didn't want to be left with any nasty surprises where Hannah would take money from me or anything. Shout out to those guys and gals here on Reddit that helped me get in contact with a great lawyer who assured me due to the fact that although we had been dating for close to 4.5 years, we had not been living together long enough to be classified as de facto. And the fact that I was paying all of the utilities of the property she was living in and not paying rent demonstrated that she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. Just to be sure, he drafted what I thought was a pretty solid legal document just in case anything went wrong legally. More good news. My boss approached me the following week and offered me a promotion to return to the city and lead the team that I was a part of, which meant I wouldn't have to travel as much and be in the one location, and due to the success of my hometown's office, that they were considering having 5 to 7 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as part of my team. I said yes and began the process of initiating my transfer, which would take about 6 weeks. It was perfect, more than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon getting back to my hometown the following week, I began to start in mode the rest of my plan. I asked Craig to do me a solid and approve 1 week's worth of vacation for Hannah for 2 weeks. I wanted to send her and a friend or two away on a short break. He agreed. He jumped up and gave me a huge hug before I made the most significant decision of my life for the second time, congratulating me on being ready to retake the lead. I hugged him back tight, but not the way I think he imagined it at the time. He agreed and blocked out the week also for me. I asked him not to say anything to anyone as I wanted to make it a big surprise as I could. I knew that it would be spread like wildfire around the office. Regardless, that was my plan. That night, I told Hannah that I had booked her and 2 friends to go to a tropical spa resort. All expenses paid for a week. No questions asked. Pick 2 friends and come back to the biggest surprise of her life to have. I then told her that the following week I was going to spend it in the city preparing for a very important client who was one of my biggest accounts and needed some people in my team to help before flying out the following week, and I wouldn't be home until the Monday she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her a little. But I told her it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to say to her was that I had decided to take 2 weeks vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the crack storm that was about to break out the moment she stepped foot on the plane, as well as enjoying my first stage of freedom. On Sunday, 2 weeks later, I flew back and began driving home. Once getting there, I'd done a quick pass by my house, and sure enough, Craig's car was there like the first night I had caught them. I parked a little ways back and checked the CCTV cameras. They were all live, but I couldn't find them anywhere. I switched to the spy cameras, and then, with the camera I hid in the bedside lamp, I found them, going at it in my bedroom. We hadn't installed any CCTV in our bedroom, so she probably felt they were safe there, on our bed. No surprise, honestly, as I had recorded them constantly doing this over the 2 weeks I had been away. I then made my first call to the police blocking my caller ID. I told them that I was one of my neighbors and saw someone hanging around in their car in the alley behind my house and occasionally passing something through the windows to passing cars, while also looking into my yard, and I was concerned that they were dealing drugs. I gave them the license plate and description for Craig's car and told them I suspected him, Craig, to be the drug dealer. They said they would have someone there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. Then, using a new email I had just opened, I sent all the videos from the spy cam of Craig in his office doing drugs and also the photos of the other night I ransacked his desk to his boss. I then called Hannah and told her I was about 10 minutes from home and that I knew she was flying out tomorrow, but desperately wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I laughed at the commotion that I caused, and I'm surprised I didn't hear any sounds. In a few short seconds, there came out Craig, who was half-dressed and flying out into the back door to his car. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect scene. As Craig was peeling away, one of the police cars rounded the corner behind me, saw Craig driving away fast, and gave chase. After pulling in, greeting an excited Hannah, and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep again. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, she and her friends were bundled into a car. After they drove away, I had to wait a few hours, but I began to execute my plan. I called my friend, who was a removalist, and apologized for the late notice, but I needed my place packed and moved on Friday. After agreeing on a time, I told him that he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then I began packing Hannah's belongings. Later that day, I got a call from the police for me to identify if I knew Craig and if I suspected him of any suspicious activities or doing drugs. Our town was hard on drug law and enforcement, or drug dealing. I expressed pretended shock and replied, "No." It turned out they had apprehended from the suspect of the previous night a lot of hard and illegal drugs in his vehicle. I grinned to myself, happy that my plan for Craig had grown to fruition. By this stage, the town was buzzing with news events in my hometown. Don't stay secret long. Craig was disgraced and promptly fired for his possession of drugs. That night, I went to my parents' house and told them and Hannah's parents also what had happened, omitting certain details, and that I was moving back to the city after being promoted. But Hannah wouldn't be a part of it. They were pretty upset initially that I hadn't let them know what was going on, but were happy that I was handling everything maturely and hadn't sunk to their level though. They didn't agree with ghosting Hannah, but after some drinks, laughs, and tears, I went home. On Friday afternoon, after a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, the real estate agent to put my house on the rental market, and did various other tasks in my hometown's office, I packed some things into my car and drove to my parents' place and said goodbye before the drive before leaving. I went to Catherine's house. Catherine had been one of Hannah's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening. The details about Craig, without her help, I probably wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I had. I gave Catherine a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of her cheating, as well as a letter and a few other legal documents from my attorney stating that she was ordered not to contact me and the details of how to access her belongings, located at the storage unit I had rented out. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. Turns out, Hannah had come home early after being alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a for rent sign out the front, freaking out. She had gone to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment that they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow be contacted by Catherine and told that she had a package for her. I was told that she didn't take too well to that, as I fully well knew at that point from the numerous angry texts and voice messages from her accusing me of setting up Craig and being deceitful, etc., etc. I was afraid she'd show up at my front door, but nothing happened. 6 weeks later, after leaving and being promoted, I'm happy and settled. Wow, this is pure brilliance, OP. Sometimes karma does need a hand. I think you handled this perfectly. They both had it coming. It takes a lot of self-control to not do something immediately in the moment. You remained calm, or as calm as one can be after seeing something like that in your own house. I feel like a lot of people's minds don't totally go there. I think often there's a huge burst of emotion in situations like that. It's hard not to let a situation totally control you and to not let your emotions own you. Moreover, it's refreshing to know that your neighbors actually look out for you there. That goes to show what you mean to the community there. You're a good man, OP. I'm sorry this happened to you, but I'm glad to hear how happy and settled you are now. Success has never felt so good. Do you have a similar story? How would you have reacted? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for joining us to Down Our Space. Like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. We'd hate for you to miss out. And if you want to listen to more stories from me, check out our lounge where I feature a larger variety of non-cheating related stories. See you there.